welcome to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst radio network. All past shows are in podcast form. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. Send your questions and comments to DJ at ArtistFirst.com. And here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Scott. And it is Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Here we are.
I think it's us because, the electronic gods almost didn't let us get online here, but we managed to do it. We fought through.
It was appointed.
It was appointed. It was appointed. That's a great segue. I think you've got the segue thing now, because my segues lately have just been silly.
Late segues.
But yes, tonight, every other Soul of the Everyman show, we're going to talk about death. We've got three topics. If you haven't figured this out by now, we got love, death, and death. Maybe we only have two topics in life. Well, actually, we're not going to talk about death. Let me calm down and rein this in just a little bit. But we are going to talk about the fact that the wonderful passage from Hebrews, which is that we are all, it's appointed unto all of us a season, let's say, a period of time, which we are present, incarnate on this earth, and then that season comes to an end for every one of us. And even though our physical existence is ephemeral and brief, and in many ways, if you look at it from the point of view of the period of time that the universe has been in existence, it is insignificant. The premise that we want to talk about tonight is that is not what defines our existence. Our physical incarnation is that brief period, but the existence of our spark, if you will, goes both before and beyond that period of time. And so this wonderful passage from Hebrews, which I think we're going to have up on the website, speaks to that again with many of the pearls of wisdom you find in the Old Testament, that the span of your days doesn't define you. The span of your days is merely, not only is it a not insignificant fact, but just a phenomenon. You exist for a period of time. You are going to not exist for a much longer period of time, at least physically. But it's also an unknowable, and in many ways, we obsess over it far too much. We spend far too much time worrying about whether we're going to, how long our life is going to be, versus how important it is just to live that life.
Your existence is not defined by your body. That was the focus. In other words, it goes far more into just your lifespan, but your physical interactions down here do not define your entire existence. They do not sing the whole song that you are. And it's understanding that for this brief period of time, your song is sung down here. And to acknowledge that, because it starts off at an appointed time, and it will end at an appointed time. If you receive that, then you understand that you have this wondrous gift of being able to choose between birth and death, the quality of the song you are singing. And it is an amazing thing, because you think about it, do you really want to have just this random song? Are you satisfied with the idea that you're just going to be these sounds maybe in the background? Or do you actually have a major part in what is being sung? That's a lot of power for a soul.
Indeed. And I think we had another show where we were talking about, in essence, composing your life song. It was some time ago.
That was Tecumseh.
That was Tecumseh, because he had written a beautiful passage. But as you just mentioned, the definition of your existence. Let's go back a little bit, because I think we jumped into the middle of this. I think all of us feel that our existence will continue past our corporeal death.
I don't think people actually think about it.
I think people do. I think certainly, if you're right, you are right. People don't dwell on it, or they don't want to think about it. They oftentimes shy away from any discussion of existence after death. But if you ask people, does your life end at your corporeal death, and give them a second to think about it, I think almost invariably, and even cross-culturally, you will find the concept of existence after death. And if you turn that around, what it really means is that your existence, as we postulated right in the beginning, is neither defined nor limited by your incarnation. The incarnation of the spirit into the body, the formation of the soul, if you will, is a period of time during which all these three things are together. You have spirit, you have the soul, you have the body. But if you ask people, well, what happened before, where were you before you were born? They'll say, well, perhaps I was a spirit that was pre-incarnated. You hear this in many different cultures. And if you ask people, well, do you believe that the spirit passes on into another existence after death? They say, well, yeah, I kind of believe that. And so you see an arc. You see that even without too much prodding, and without even thinking about it too much, we feel that our existence is not defined by this period of time. And this beautiful passage really just says that, as you mentioned, it's appointed. I'll digress for just a second. We talked a little bit in a few shows ago about the three Greek fates, and the fact that they would, one would be able to be measuring the thread of a person's life, and the other one would weave the thread, and the other one would cut the thread. The Greeks' concept was, in essence, that your life was this thread, which, as you mentioned, you could choose the path that it goes by, but it has a certain defined length. However, the thought was always that there is an existence even after the period of time that you're incarnate, and before. You'd have Hades, where your spirit would go on, and live in the in the underworld, in the afterlife, and there was even a concept of rebirth in that particular culture. So this is, I think, a universally human concept, that we don't see ourselves as limited by the body, because I think there's a portion of us that just says that's too limiting. It's such a short period of time. It doesn't feel that it would be just that somebody would come into being for this incredibly short period of time and then just dissipate into nothingness.
You mean non-existence?
As though you never existed, almost. Like you say, you're not taking your song. We talked once or several shows back about Tecumseh and taking your song back, and we've mentioned many times this idea of an eternity bank. In essence, a purpose for one's life, whatever the appointed time is, that you are incarnate. You're here to do something, to learn something, to evolve to the next step in the Buddhist tradition. And then you go back and you bring back into spirit that unique set of experiences that happened while you were incarnate, but don't define you, because after incarnation, you're bringing still you. I think Tolle would say this too. Still, there's a you, there's a presence which exists beyond the body, which brings, its experience along with it.
Well, at this point, you'd have to define the you, because that's actually two different viewpoints: the viewpoint of the eternal and the viewpoint of the consciousness that is going from birth through life to death. All right. And the idea actually is to be able to incorporate both. As Tolle would say, that consciousness in its pure form is spirit. And the idea is to awaken amidst the dream.
And I know you've mentioned this many times, the Native American tradition, that we're here to dream the common dream. But doesn't that presuppose, that whole idea of dreaming the common dream, that there is a place from which you come, that you come here from? You're in some place in spirit. You come here to dream the common dream, and then you leave and you return with your portion, your piece of the song.
Mm-hmm. And if you accept that, in other words, if you agree that your existence is far more than the body existence, which is a big leap, honestly, love. I don't know of a lot of people who have actually incorporated that concept. Usually they run away screaming. But if you truly embrace the idea that the cycle that you are participating in, when you come down, go through, and then leave, that cycle has a purpose. But the purpose is not what a human mind comes up with. That is part of the concept of the body is deciding the existence of this life. It's far more than that. The smallest of things that you interact with in this world, with other people, in this life, the smallest of things could be the greatest accomplishment for your particular soul lifetime. Because you're constantly learning. And the idea is to learn how to open your heart and love the unlovable. That's a tall order.
It certainly is. But I think I'd like to go back just a little bit. I think implicit in most of the philosophies and religions that people espouse is certainly the concept of an afterlife. And so you're certainly right that people don't incorporate it well, and they often, because of the sound and fury, which is life, people would rather spin themselves up in the latest variegouses of the news or a sports team or whatever, or just anything to
not think about.
Well, right, to occupy the present mind. To go back to Tolle again, this idea of constantly having the voices, having the reactive mind constantly being occupied, and his breakthrough was to to realize that there's a presence, the presence that is just being below everything else. Once you get rid of all distraction, you have presence. And I don't know if he's defined it, but I think that presence would be more akin to soul than spirit, because it is an individual. But Tolle may have a different concept, and you may know that he has defined it one way or the other. However, you're certainly right that people don't like to live in the presence, or they find it very difficult, at least initially, to live in presence or live in this awareness of that you have the appointed time. And I would say that one of the reasons people shy away from that is that if you think about your life as an appointed time, there are two major things that are glaring right away, is that it's a very short time. And people don't like to think of that, but it is a very short time. People always say, oh, life goes so fast. Life goes very fast. And the other, really related concept is that you have no idea. You didn't ask to be born, but you have no idea when your appointed time will end. You have all these plans, but no one knows when the appointed time will end. And if you truly incorporate that, the thing that pops out instantly is that it could be any time, which is scary. But then the related conclusion is that because you have no idea, if you truly incorporate it, that means you should live in the moment as much as humanly possible. It's almost impossible to always be in the moment, but Tolle's concept of being in presence as much as humanly possible is so correct, because it says, I don't know when my appointed time will be, my end, so I want to live in the now. The whole idea of his books, the power of now, is the power of realizing that your short appointed time has an ill-defined and unknowable end. So don't spend any time not living in the now.
Well, it means that the mental aspect, being in that mental turmoil and worry, and being in the emotional dramas, is a waste of time. Because when you realize how precious being present in here and the now actually is, how pristine, how clear, how infinite that awareness actually is, you would choose to put your efforts into abiding there. All right? But most of the time, that clarity is frightening, because people do not want to take that step into being able to see something greater than yourself. Usually it's because they feel like they're not doing it right.
There's certainly that.
Doing it right, when I say that, what I mean, it's not that you have to, how do I say this? Humans down here have a tendency to judge themselves and other people constantly. Okay? And it's a painful process. If you're truthful about what that entails and that how it makes you feel when you wind up judging other people and judging yourself, you feel awful. And if you're truthful about that, you believe that there's got to be some sort of repercussion from that. That I'm going to be punished in some way for something bad that's been done, because I've already seen this is bad, so I'm going to be receiving the repercussions of that. Awareness has nothing to do with that at all. That's a mind construct. where you've programmed a part of the mind to constantly do an evaluation on whether you're doing it right or not. That's hell on wheels. And there's nothing wrong with doing an evaluation without the emotional and judgmental charge of I'm bad or I'm good, depending upon if I do it right or wrong. It just is. And if you've accomplished the task, it's one thing. If you haven't, then you figure out other ways. But for the most part, human person believes that, I don't know if I want to take a step into that because I feel like I'm going to get judged. And it's usually you judging you.
Right, and that they're afraid of stepping into is really stepping away from this reactive, emotional, constant sort of talking to oneself and reaffirming one's sort of temporal existence. Spirit is eternal, and presence, as Tully says, is eternal. But yet, again, going back to our sort of theme, this idea of the appointed time is the temporal existence, and the reactive, emotional, the judgmental mind is there to reinforce, as almost relentlessly reinforce, the idea of a temporal existence, and temporal in the sense that it's always concerned with time, and usually the past or the future, and ignoring both the now and the fact that there is an appointed time and it's short. It's the mind spends its time worrying about things which it cannot control, and reacting emotionally to things which are really phantoms. They're imaginary things that could happen, or that you imagine have happened, or that are, you make up motives for, all the things that people do in essence to make themselves, in a clinical term, crazy. You make yourself crazy, and you push yourself farther and farther and farther away, layer by layer, away from presence, to where it's all reaction. So, that, as you said, if you're there, you're not you're not living in even in the concept of this is your appointed time. You've denied the fact that you are going to stop existing by pretending that, in essence, all these future and past possibilities and things that happened that you're recalling into the present or into the future are eternal. That this morass of emotion and judgment is somehow the eternity.
Well, it's believing that must be what it's all about.
Exactly.
And it's not. There's a way out of it. It is the foundation of why Buddha said all life is suffering.
Yes.
All that, as you said, morass of emotion and judgment and worry and fear is suffering. Deep suffering. And to admit that, to understand that, is the first step. It's also to understand that your mind does not need to make a list and tell you the things that you're supposed to do in a certain order so that you will never do it wrong. And somehow you're wasting your time span. The mind cannot comprehend the level and the depth of the present moment experience in consciousness. The vastness of consciousness would just blow it away. It usually just silences it, which is a lovely thing because you don't get that buzzy noise in your head anymore.
Yeah, it's true.
But that silence has a quality of life and awareness to it that is so vibrant. that you realize that this is the foundation of everything. Everything. And it's a task not to be distracted by everything that comes up. Basically what this is you begin to learn how to handle the everyday tasks that come up, all on their own timing and certainly not on yours. But you learn how to handle it and realize that my pristine awareness and the beating of my heart are the same thing. So I must return to ground, and let me operate from there.
And I think this concept that you just mentioned, this returning to ground. I'm going to postulate that what Tolle is talking about, and this idea of denying your extracorporeal existence and the fact that your presence is not defined by the body, denying that is a modern or a more modern concept. Why I say that is because if you look at Hebrews, which was probably written 3,000 years ago or something of that nature, way back, and you see writings of a people who are much closer to the physical in the sense that they really relied upon the seasons, upon the earth to provide, upon the fact that life was very close, near and dear. Your heartbeat was not guaranteed on a day-to-day basis. And so they had to live much closer to the physical. And I think the closer you are to that survival physical dependence on your next breath or the next morsel of food is something that really requires you to be in the moment to get. It also makes you attend to the eternal, because you realize that this ephemeralness, this living close to the bone, close to the earth, also opens you spiritually. This passage says it's given to you. You have a time appointed on this earth. So there's instantly an awareness that it's a short time. An appointed time is something which comes and goes with the day, with the season. At those times, maybe not in the Hebrews, but in those times you would say, how many winters do you have? How you would count your years, as a precious thing. Your days is a precious thing. And when you do that, sorry.
Oh, how many winters have you survived?
Have you survived? When you count your days as a precious thing and your moments as a precious thing, you come closer and closer, even in the physical, to the now, because it's immediate. And I think the wisdom that is the immediacy of living a little bit on the edge, a little bit where your next heartbeat is not guaranteed, puts you into the moment. Then you bring us 3,000 years forward, or some portion thereof, and you're so divorced from the needs of existing, of feeding yourself and sheltering yourself and keeping your heart beating, that the mind is just free to just gabble on about all kinds of nonsense and all kinds of distractions and all kinds of denial. And it has allowed the mind to take over what was truly a precious sense of existence that was ephemeral. The mind has told us that existence is as long as I want it to be, and I can control everything. And that pushes you further and further and further away from presence.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're going to go further and further and further away from this wonderful conversation. We're going to go back to the studio and have a little break. And we'll come back on the other side and we'll talk more about the appointed time, because I blew that one.
wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief, Dev, is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers. The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
The Timeless Esoterica radio program with Dr. Bruce is broadcast on the 4th Monday of every month at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern, on ArtistFirst.com. We explore topics including the paranormal, alien life, mysteries, conspiracies, hidden history, oddities, and much more. Each show will feature a special guest with exciting and thought-provoking discussion. Always keep an open mind, an open heart, live forever, and remember Dr. Bruce believes in you.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lyons is Book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
Thanks for joining us on The Soul of the Everyman on Artist First World Radio. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Z-Man. And see, that was the end of the appointed time.
Yes.
It seemed short.
As it always does.
As it always does. So I was on a roll, but but thank you for reminding me that we had to go to our little break there, because I will pick right back up. Is that that idea of living close to the earth? You mentioned Buddhism, and you mentioned the fact that all life is suffering, but one of the reasons that that Buddhism looks to quiet the mind is that the mind is very good at almost prosecuting or perfecting suffering. In essence, what the mind does is imagine suffering, Emotions also play into this, where the emotions, the anticipation, the fear of suffering, the fear of judgment, the idea that somehow you could have avoided, you give yourself grief for not doing it right, for doing it wrong, for for making the wrong decisions. All these things are artifacts. Life itself, of course, has variances. You can have a disaster, you can have a bad health situation, and so on and so on. But the mind amplifies these things and turns even minor events, minor setbacks into much greater significance, and taking, basically amplifying the suffering and taking your precious appointed time and wasting it on dwelling upon the suffering that's occurring or might occur or had occurred, in the past or the future, or imagining that something bad is going to happen to you, and therefore preparing against the worst, and trying to do the right thing, and then judging yourself harshly when you do the wrong thing. All of this is the suffering mind, is pushing you away from existence, putting those layers on. But I would contend that if you live very close to the bone, or very close to the land, or very close to survival, where things become clear, where I must do this to live today, that those artifacts of the mind get pushed away perforce by the fact that you must survive. There's an imperative there. And that even living a little bit above that, where you're able to see at least some comfort, but it's a very day-by-day thing. Every day I must go and draw water from the well. Every day I must pound grain to make bread. Every day I have to do certain things or I will not live. Occupies the mind at a now level, keeps it from building too many layers and worrying about things, and does give you what you see here, the wisdom 3,000 years ago in Hebrews, that the appointed time is short, that you have to live for today, and that judgment will come at the end, but don't worry about it today. Today we got things to do. Today we have to live in the now. And I think where we are in 3,000 years later is so far away from that we've given the mind free rein to make up tremendous layers of stories upon stories upon stories upon stories, and then internets upon internets upon internets of stories, and getting so far away that Tolle's wisdom is so precious and prescient that when you go there, you find it's almost like a relief. You're giving up all this spinning and all this energy that you put into keeping these hot balloons of nothingness and suffering up, and coming back to, just being the presence again, and being in the quiet now. And it's he even says that when you get there, even for an instant, it's like, I can let all this burden go and just be.
The experience of being in the now, you cannot put into words. Okay? And it is something, this is the reason why you have so many people who were Buddhists or monks trying to reach what they call enlightenment. All right? And there were all these exercises, and it was all mental, to try to break the hold that the mind has on your awareness, on your focus. And it's not very easy for a mind, or rather a consciousness, to let go of what is being presented in front of it by the mind, because the mind knows how to present things reasonably. And that reasonableness isn't necessarily looked at as what is the motivation for this method of thinking. Mind wants you to pay attention to it because it has all the answers. And that's what it tells you. But the truth of the matter is it cannot even stand when your consciousness is fully present. Fully present. It just sort of whiffs away. And your emotions, too, when you have all this emotion flying around, it's very small against the immensity of the presence. And this is why there is so much literature been written on trying to get there, as if you are giving instructions to your mind or your emotions so that you can get there. But the truth is, it's beyond all that. And you have to make the decision that you will not be distracted away. But you must make that as a, what's the word? It's a firm, internal, heartfelt decision by all of you that you will not be distracted.
It's difficult, right? I think there's something that we've kind of gone past a couple times. I want to just come back to it and see if you agree. There are a couple different ways. Let's say there's at least two that we've talked about just over the last few minutes, where you can push the mind into away and into its, let's say, its place where presence is dominant and the mind is just a piece. One way is what we've talked about a little bit with coming into spirit, coming into awareness through, let's say, the Buddhists, all suffering, and using these mental exercises. And what that does is quiet the mind. You try, but that's one way. And I think that the other way was what we mentioned earlier in this wisdom of living close. And I'll say it because I think when you are in an existential moment, when your life now hangs by a thread, you've been given a diagnosis of 2 or 3 days to live, cancer. You've been given a moment where it is now or never. Your appointed time. You've been given the curse or blessing that says your appointed time is ending, like within the next few minutes. The mind instantly vanishes. It just goes to its corner. And spirit arises in those existential moments, even if it's a longer period of time. We saw it many, many times in the cancer wards with these kids because they became not only accepting of the existential nature, but in the moment, in the now. And maybe because they were children, it was a little bit easier for them. But even those folks, people who are given an existential moment, your life will end now. Understand that the appointed time is short, and that the now is instantly precious, and that the mind's distractions become exposed. The Buddhists try to do it through constantly, basically arguing the mind into silence. Push. And in Hebrews we see it because you're living so close to, your heartbeat and the things you have to do to survive, keep you in the now. And then there's the idea that, when your life is threatened, when you're at the precipice, when you've been given, a realization of your mortality, and you accept that, it throws the mind to its place, and it opens up and gives you the insight that the now is precious, and that from that you see the wonderful peace that comes in that realization. You realize that your appointed time was always short. You realize that your existence goes beyond the appointed time, and you come into contact with the now and with the eternal, which is the now. It it's a way that you get there, that you realize that the soul and the spirit don't always have to be in the body, that the spirit has the eternity and that the soul has an existence which is extracorporeal. It's something I think that we lose with all this illusion that we live with here, all this sound and fury signifying nothing that we live with here, and that the philosophies that try to get you to the now are always about getting back to presence, quieting the mind, or concentrating it on the now, because the existence that you have now is shown to be short and precious.
What I always found kind of distracting and sort of really just sad was the fact that a lot of the ascetic religions especially basically blame the body for the fact that the consciousness was not able to get into that purity of consciousness. You know, they were always distracted by something, and they were always constantly blaming body for it. All right, and then they would be punishing the body, not eating, not sleeping, not, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I sit there and I go, well, the body itself has a level of consciousness as well. It's just not allowed to drive the car. All right? And most people would say, well, if you let the body drive, then wouldn't everything go to, because it would just be impulses. It's like, no, you don't understand. The fact that you have levels of consciousness, a body consciousness, a soul consciousness, mind consciousness, as well as a spirit, is a very unique and wonderful gift, especially for your physical body. But there is a level of body wisdom that most people do not even begin to appreciate. They just assume, well, body's here, whatever. It'll do what I tell it to do. As if it's some sort of automaton. But if you listen to your physical body, there is a feedback loop there that is truly amazing. And what is it that kills most human beings early? But stress. And what is stress? All this turmoil that arises from whether it's emotion or mental worry that the body basically keeps taking in and taking in and taking in, because mind isn't resolving it, nor are you resolving your emotions. You're just letting it rain, and the body takes it in like a giant sponge. So all the talk that people have about manifestation, oh, this is the way to manifest the life you want. Oh, this is the way to manifest, whatever it may be that you want in your life, have not even begun to realize that your body manifests it all for you in this present moment. So if you are in angst and petrified and fearful about something, it manifests in your body, whether it is Crohn's disease or all kinds of ailments, cancers. I've
migraines, Addison's. There's so many things with cortisol, hypercortisol reactions. All those things are exactly what you're saying.
The body takes it in. And I always thought it was rather unfair, because then when the body is gone, that means your spirit soul just goes off and your body's just lying there after doing all this for you and trying to keep you going.
That's a very interesting way of putting it. You're so right in the fact that people treat their bodies as automatons, as things that you just make go, and that don't have. And you often talk about listening to the body is so important from the point of view, as you say, when the body is under stress, listen to it, give it what it needs. When your body tells you that something is wrong, people often discount that. You feel a chill, or you feel a bad feeling about something that comes up from the body has wisdom. But the body is, interestingly enough, and you just mentioned it, the body has an immediacy too. The body lives in the now because that's why it has all this stress that it absorbs. The body doesn't understand the future or the past. It understands the now. It is only the mind which lives in the then and maybe and could be and might have been and oh, if I only had done this and oh, if I had only done that. The mind is the one which skitters all over the universe trying to make trouble. It's not that the mind is a bad thing. The mind is an amazing thing, but it is a troublemaker. In one sense. It's also an incredible tool.
An incredible tool. And it can be very willful.
Yes.
So I'm going to go back to what I was saying before about the body. I thought that was very unfair. That, okay, well, you guys are going off. I mean, this body basically produced children for the next generation. That's not easy, guys, okay? Talk about pieces of your life leaving you. That's pretty much it. Women participate with that. But I want to say that Jesus brought forth the resurrection, which means that the body is reborn into what it was meant to be. It was meant to be perfect and capable of being in the presence of God Himself. And that is the purpose of your appointed birth and your appointed death.
That's a very interesting insight. I would say that the resurrected body and the physical body are different bodies. But regardless, the idea of bringing the body into an exalted state. You mentioned earlier the Buddhists and the fact, and the ascetics especially, who are always blaming the body for all these things. And in fact, I believe many of these philosophies are trying to, in essence, eradicate the body.
Mm-hmm.
In essence, torture it to the point where it like succumbs. And it is very interesting that in Judeo-Christian or in the resurrection of the body into an exalted state is something that you don't see in any, I don't believe, in any other philosophy.
No, there isn't, unless you were some sort of pharaoh.
Right, unless you're a pharaoh. But I don't want to just digress. Maybe that's another. See, we always, near the end of every show, we usually have another topic. We make note of this.
We'll make note of this.
But in any case, I believe though that it is only in the unification of the immediacy of the body, which is an important thing. It has its appointed time. It is born and it will die. And as we say in The Soul of Everyman, nobody gets off the planet alive, meaning that your body doesn't. But that idea of an existence, an individual existence, your spark, your soul, which exists certainly beyond your corporeal existence, and in some ways, perhaps even before your corporeal existence, if you believe in incarnation, and then the overarching eternity of spirit, which is beyond time. It doesn't even respect time. It doesn't respect space. We talked a few shows back about the fifth dimension, in the sense that the fifth dimension is the dimension of spirit. It's the dimension of intention, the dimension of will. And the interaction of these three components in harmony, not the ascetics who blame the body, not the mind who wants to take over everything, not the people who want to just woo-woo into the spirit and stay there forever. It's the harmony of these three things that is, and the realization of the presence of now, which inhabits those three states at the same time. Now is in the body, is in the spark of the soul, and is in the spirit at the same time. Is the presence of true enlightenment. And as you said, you sing your song in that now, regardless of whether you think you do or not, especially think. You sing your song in the now, and you bring whatever song you sung in the corporeal, in the spirit, and in the soul back. It's yours. It is your creation. It is your piece of the creation.
Right. Very much so. But I love and embrace the concept of the physical body being resurrected into a much higher form, which is where we were meant to be.
I agree. But I would say that higher, that exalted body. We're on to another show.
Oh yeah, this is.
We have to talk about. We're going to go and talk about the exalted. But in any case, the realization of the fact that the appointed time means that life is short, and
but this is my point. The appointed time also means that it is also appointed for the body to rise.
Your life is short, therefore precious, and your mind is doing you a disservice by telling you otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And totally would say that you live in the presence, you live in the eternal now, because in doing so, you find that harmony, and you find the preciousness of life, and you find the end of the show. So, I am Michael Lyons, and this is The Soul of the Everyman.
And I'm Margaret. And thank you for listening.